Today's program is for singles of all ages, those in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and even beyond. Dealing with undesired singleness next on Significant Insights. Hello and welcome to the program. Are you single but frustrated because you thought you'd be married by now? Well, if so, today's program is for you. Lisa Anderson is the Director of Young Adults for Focus on the Family, and she's also the host of the popular weekly radio program and podcast, The Boundless Show. Like a lot of young people today in her 20s, Lisa focused on her career, expecting somehow that marriage would just kind of happen magically like in the romantic comedies. But it didn't. So she's written the book, The Dating Manifesto, to help singles understand what they need to know about dating and to help them avoid some of the mistakes that women of her generation have made. She also has advice for women in their 40s, 50s, and beyond who are grieving the absence of that special someone. She spoke about these issues with Deborah Fraser.
You've written this book for singles like yourself, some who never expected to remain single. Is that true?
Yeah, it is. I mean, really, it is born out of my own story because I never expected to remain single, and most of my peers didn't either. In fact, going through high school was told, Lisa, you have plenty of time for marriage in the future. What you need to focus on right now is your education and your career and get all your ducks in a row. And then someday in the future, you can tack on marriage and it'll be so easy. You'll find your Prince Charming. And I woke up one day and I was 30 and it hadn't happened. And I was like, what? What did I do wrong? And so that kind of precipitated the start of my thoughts about the book.
Well, tell us about your background, and let me just admit, before we go any further, that it's as if you were in my living room all through high school. That's exactly what I told my daughters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I grew up in California. I went through the California public schools, and that's exactly, the women, the teachers I had, fueled kind of by the feminist gains of the 60s and 70s. That's the message that they'd kind of adopted for themselves, and that's what they were trying to pass on to me. So I just bought it. And it wasn't even that I was anti-marriage. I grew up in a solid Christian home. My folks were married for 50 years before my dad passed away. Long history of marriage and love for marriage in my family and even in the church. But it was like the church wasn't countering the message that I was getting, in the public square. They were basically just silent. And it was kind of this assumptive thing of, well, Lisa, we're assuming you're going to get married someday and more power to you, send us the invitation when it comes, but no true coaching or championship of the idea of marriage, especially biblically.
Well, I think for us as well, though, living in California, as you did, many of the homes are, two-income family homes. So if you are more educated, then you're able to support your family in the state of California. So I think that actually, launched us into that kind of projection.
Or you have a lot of my peers who grew up in a single-parent home. And so the other challenge we're seeing with the younger adult generation is this idea that I'm not sure I can do marriage. So millennials, for example, are the product of the largest divorce generation in history, the boomers. And so they saw their parents split up. They lived with one parent most of the time. Many of them have had absent dads. And so they're like, I believe in marriage. I think it's a good thing. In fact, millennials believe in marriage as much as the greatest generation, their grandparents. But they don't think they can do it successfully because they haven't seen it done well. So it's breeding a lot of fear, a lot of paralyzation, a lot of stops and starts when it comes to relationships.
Well, in your 20s, you weren't an advocate necessarily for marriage. Why is
I would say, again, I wasn't against marriage. I thought marriage was a good thing. I knew it was biblical. I knew it was great. I totally assumed I would be married someday. And I had this vision in my head. I played with my Barbies and kind of put Barbie and Ken together and rode them off in the Corvette and did all that. But I was very assumptive that it would be easy, that it would just happen, that I was certainly amazing enough to get married and to have someone fall in love with me.
Right.
I mean, I believed it and didn't think that I'd have to work that hard at it. I went to a Christian college, spent a lot of money right there, and emerged still single. So where I didn't get a refund, what's up with that? But so really in walking that path, it was very much like, what am I doing wrong? What's happening?
Yes.
This isn't, I thought this was going to be so easy. And it turns out following my career path was a lot more easy than, following one to marriage and family.
Well, and you actually work for Focus on the Family. That's pro-marriage. I mean,
Yeah.
how did that play
That's
into
a
all
little
this?
ironic. Yeah, not only that, but I led their media relations team and did interviews on behalf of marriage and parenting for years. So what's she doing, No, exactly. And so it's funny because here I entered my role at Focus on the Family, again, believing in marriage, knowing it's a great thing, but finding myself single. And in fact, whether at Focus or even in the corporate world when I worked there, I often heard this script of, well, Lisa, you're single, so I'm sure you have all the time in the world, or you're just living it up, or you're just, maybe you can help lead this Sunday school class at church or help in the nursery because you've got all this free time.
Yes.
And so a lot of assumptions about being single, that it's just this jet-setting lifestyle that especially women, oh, you'll love it. You've got all this free time on your hands and it'll be easy, so just make it happen.
What was the dialogue with you and the Lord during that time?
Yeah, I would say I've gone through different dialogues with the Lord. So, in fact, I jokingly tell people when people say, look back on the years and reflect on being single and why you didn't get married. And I say I blame my 20s on myself. Definitely some ignoring the facts in front of me. Certainly, I went through this phase in my 20s where no guy was good enough because I was God's princess and I was just going to find someone nearly perfect, because I guess I was. Whatever.
And I believe that.
Oh, yeah. I would like you to believe that, Debbie. So walking through this phase of like, okay, 20s, it's all going to happen in the future. Then the 30s, yes. I panicked. I tried to make up for lost time. So then I entered my season of just too many chances. Dating guys that I met, I went into online dating guys who, were Christians, but kind of, some loserish, qualities, whatever. So I tell people, I say, I blame my 20s on myself, my 30s I'm blaming on men, and now my 40s I'm just going to have to blame on the Lord and take it to Him directly.
Well, a married couple forced you to reevaluate marriage.
Very true. I work for Boundless.org at Focus on the Family, which is our young adults ministry specifically geared towards preparing the next generation of marriages and families. And it was the founders of Boundless that, as I was working with them at Focus, started asking me about my own dating life. And so I was sharing, I'd come back on a Monday and tell them about my date Friday night, and they're like, wow, that doesn't sound the best, and I don't know why you're going out with this guy, and that choice of yours was pretty lame. And so I was like, what? I got all defensive. I'm like, I'm a Christian girl who knows about dating. I should know how to do this. And so long story short, the advice and the wisdom and just the rebuke even that I got from them transformed my vision of marriage and what it means to think about marriage and the process of getting to marriage biblically and intentionally. Because I think where it's come about in the church with some bad thinking is this idea of, okay, let's just throw it all in God's lap. And so it ends up being this weird mystical kind of voodoo of like, oh, I don't have to do anything. I need to be hands off. I just need to trust the Lord, which is the extreme opposite of the I need to control, I need to do everything myself. And so I was kind of playing both ends of the spectrum, it seemed. And they had to kind of help me reshape my vision of that and kind of say, Lisa, you might want to do this differently.
Lisa's reshaped view of marriage is explained in detail in her book, The Dating Manifesto. As we go to the break, Lisa talks about some of the ways young adults can start preparing for marriage.
If you want marriage in your future, start preparing. And that may mean there are things that are outside of a relationship that can happen. That may mean addressing the crippling debt that you are currently in, whether it's consumer debt, whether it's school debt, getting your act together, knowing what it means to be a full, responsible adult in charge of your own life, your own decisions. Stop calling up mom and dad to fix all your problems, get you out of all your scrapes. It also means get yourself plugged into a solid and biblical church. So this is where you're going to find people to speak into your life. It's where you're going to get biblical teaching. It's where you're going to get mentors and accountability. It's where you take ownership for your own faith journey. So all of that is super important.
Welcome back. Today, Deborah Fraser is talking with radio host Lisa Anderson about how to be intentional in looking for a spouse. She says that today's young people want marriage, but they've seen their parents divorce in such high numbers that they're postponing it for themselves because they're afraid of messing it up. Lisa has written the book, The Dating Manifesto, that's filled with the kind of wisdom that, well, she wished she had been given when she first started dating.
What do you wish people would have told you in your 20s, other than what they did tell you?
Yeah, a lot of things. I think one is, Lisa, the process of dating and getting to marriage is an intentional process that requires prayer, it requires effort. It doesn't just happen. This idea of you're going to find the one. I mean, we've bought such, hook, line, and sinker. We've been so duped by Hollywood and beyond that our entire romantic life is going to play out in 90 minutes like a rom-com. And I think women especially have bought that. And so we think we're going to lock eyes across a Starbucks. And of course, this guy is going to have some kind of theological degree just by chance. And he's also going to, earn bank and be
Again,
amazing.
you've been in my living room.
Conversationalist, all this kind of stuff. And so, so we want him to be nearly perfect and invite him into our lives. And this whole idea, what it boils down to is this idea that there's the one, this person out there that is God's perfect match for you. And if you just find him somewhere, on this earth, then your life is going to be smooth sailing. And I don't see that as being biblical anywhere by any stretch of the imagination.
Let's talk about college young women for just a moment. Is the dating pool getting smaller for them?
I would say, I think there is a little bit of a numbers game in the sense that, in fact, when I speak on college campuses, especially Christian college campuses, I say, look around you, because never will you be in the same room, in the same sphere with as many like-minded, headed in the same direction, generally normal and healthy people as you are right now. When you finish college, you enter the workforce, then if you're going to church, maybe you'll find a 20-somethings group, college career group. By the time you hit your 30s, that's fractured yet again, and the pool does get smaller, and it's very difficult. And so you have to keep that in mind. It's not something with unlimited returns, for example. But at the same time, you have to balance that with a trust, in God that he's got your back, he knows what's going on, he can direct you to someone. So I always say, let God steer you as a moving object in a direction that he wants you to go.
Okay, so women in their 30s and 40s, then do you find most of them frustrated that they never got married?
Most, yes, because again, most women do view marriage in their future. There are very few women that I've talked to who say, oh, there's absolutely no way I'll ever get married or have kids. I just don't want it. Most women will say they want it. Now they want it on their terms, which is an entirely different story. But there is a frustration, and what's happened, Debbie, is that we have seen a generation of young adults basically take a biblical interpretation of male-female, of roles, of marriage, and flip them. So what we have is a generation of young men who are, to paraphrase my listeners and readers, passive and lame. They're stepping back. They're saying, oh, what am I supposed to be doing? In turn, the women are rising up and getting catty and crazy and deciding that they're going to take, matters into their own hands, and they're going to make these guys fall in love with them. They're going to make them marry them. And what guy wants that? None that I've ever talked to. And so we're working at cross purposes, and it's making everyone crazy.
And you can fix all this.
Fix it all. Yep. No. I think it's a fair measure of biblical counsel, of mentors. I'm a big fan of young adults needing mentors in their life. It's so funny how so many Christian young adults will say, oh, don't meddle with my love life. I'm going to go online. I'm going to try speed dating. I'm going to try some dating apps. I'll maybe talk to my friends about it. But who better to help you find a great match than the people who know and love you best? And that's your family, that's mentors, that's people within your church.
What would you say to women in their 40s or 50s? What would you like to tell them right now?
Really, the women I talk to who are walking through that season of life, I try to put my arm around their shoulder, because many of them are feeling like failures. They feel like, if I only would have done this, if I would have treated, oh, it's when I was 26 and I did that. That's what got me off track. There's a lot of regret. There's a lot of shaming. There's a lot of just self-hatred about where they are, wondering if they're enough and why weren't they enough and why did their friends get given this gift of marriage and they didn't. And I say, it's hard, because I think to myself, and I've talked with my single girlfriends about this, I can trust God, and I know that God's there for me, but I don't buy into all this Jesus is my boyfriend business, because first of all, he's the God of the universe. But secondly, he's not there. Like a while ago, I had my fence broke down at my house. Jesus didn't come and fix that fence for me. So I think we have to acknowledge the things that single women grieve about. Loneliness, feeling like other than my mom who loves me and I'm just her little baby, I'm no one's most important person in this world, Debbie. I'm not. I mean, that's just the natural, the spouse that I would have who would say that, who would send me flowers, who would show up, who'd be there. I just don't have that, and that's a reality, and I have to be able to grieve that. I now will not be married in my 20s or 30s. I've passed the 40 mark. That is no longer part of my story. My dad will not be at my wedding. He's now gone. I've had to grieve all these things, and so I encourage women, grieve the losses you've had. Yeah. Walk through the story, push into it, and guys too. There are many men who are grieving things that, whether through their own decisions or just the way life has played out, it's hard. We are in a culture that is opposing marriage. It is a culture that is trying to fracture and prevent marriage. And so we have to acknowledge that as the church and fight against it and pray against it. And so, just being honest about that, going into Scripture. And I love how the Psalms say, pour out your complaint to God. He's the one that wants to hear it. Don't go complaining to all the guys who you wanted to date who didn't date you. That's not going to get you anywhere. But God is ready to get into your business and to listen.
There's some legitimate fears about being single as you age.
Yeah, and I've lived many of them. In fact, it's wild, and I often tear up when I talk about this, because I have an older mom, so I'm the youngest of 6 kids, and my dad's now gone. He died of cancer, and so my mom's navigating widowhood on her own. And I think to myself, here's my mom who has 6 kids who love her, who are in her life, who are caring for her, watching out for her future, who are advocating for her. And it immediately, as I process that, makes me think, who's going to do that for me? Who's going to be in my life? Who's going to take me on as their burden? Who's going to visit me when I'm old and alone? Am I going to be cared for by the state? What's that going to look like? And all of my fears of singleness rise up in me when I say that. But I've had to process that with the Lord, and it's something, Debbie, we all trust God with something.
You're right, we do.
Most of us have to trust God with multiple things at once. And God is not sitting there wringing his hands going, what in the world am I going to do with Lisa? Because there is no one I have to love her. There is no one who will be in community with her. There's no way I could possibly take care of her. It's just not true. God has his plan for me, whatever that may be. And so I have to rest in that. I have to do my part, live life where I am, be excited about what God has right in front of me, and know that if he wants me married, he could get me married tomorrow. He could have already introduced me to my future husband. If you're out there, please let me know. But, it's just that I have to rest in that. My business of trusting is with God, not with men, not with others. I need to let go of the fear.
Walk in faith, not fear, which is not always easy. Thanks for, sharing that with us.
Absolutely.
There's so much more in Lisa's book that we couldn't cover here that I really would urge you to get a copy, especially if you're single or you have singles in your life. It's called The Dating Manifesto, and it can be purchased online wherever books are sold. And you can also hear Lisa's podcast through her website at lisacanderson.com. Final thoughts on the relationship between pain and gifts when we come back.
Think about the ways in which God wants to use your pain to reach many lives, to save many lives.
Welcome back. Today, Lisa Anderson shared some of the pain and grief that comes from being single into middle age. Yet, although she has faced disappointment, she's using her experiences and her gifts to help others. Vanessa Scott, founder and director of Love Never Fails in Dublin, California, talks more about the relationship between gifts and pain in today's Final Thoughts.
Genesis 50:20 provides some insight into the relationship between pain and gifts. Pain is something that Joshua experienced greatly, as he was the favorite of his father, and he often was, he received a word from the Lord in 2 dreams that he shared with his siblings. And because of the favoritism and the insight and the visions that he was receiving from God, his siblings became jealous of him and sold him into slavery. And during that time, he suffered much, waiting on his family, wondering what he had done to deserve that type of treatment, and even suffering physically. I mean, we have no account of all the beatings that he probably endured, and maybe even some of the experiences that some of the people that we work with experience in terms of human trafficking. And yet, he used all of that difficulty and even the inspiration that the Lord gave him in his early years to come into agreement with his calling as a leader of the nation. And the Lord began to provide favor for him and connect him to the right people and put him in the right places. And ironically, there at the end of Genesis 50, he comes in contact with his family again. And he's able to, of course, be real, express his pain about their abandonment, but also forgive them. And he states that what the enemy means for bad, God uses for good. Today, I want to encourage you to think about the times where you may have suffered greatly, the ways in which you may have been abandoned, and even by your family members, even by your best friends. And yet, you have found a way to come to this place. And hopefully, even now, you're receiving some sort of insight on how that pain is being used, or maybe God is prodding at you to use that pain for His glory, to use that pain to walk and live in your purpose and your gifts. I've heard many preachers use this phrase. How many of you in your seats are sitting on your gifts? Sitting on your gifts. And I believe personally that my gifts have come directly from the pain that I suffered. And so I just encourage you to think about the ways in which God wants to use your pain to reach many lives, to save many lives, and to be an expression of His love.
Thanks, Vanessa, for that really inspiring word. And you know, it's interesting that what Joseph's brothers and the devil meant for evil for Joseph, God just turned it around right in the deepest valley, and not only used it as a blessing to Joseph, but also a blessing to his brothers and to the entire family. You know, I like what the Apostle Paul said. He said, in whatsoever state I find myself, meaning whatever condition that I find myself, no matter what it is, I am there with content. Now, the reason he could say that is because God had a plan for him in that place in his life. I like that statement, bloom where you're planted. And it's interesting because Lisa said that so many people who are single are putting off their life until they get married. But I appreciate the fact that Lisa, in the midst of what she is seeing as grief, is also productive. She's taking her gifts and she's using those for the glory of God, and not only for the glory of God, but also as a blessing to a lot of people. I like that again, bloom where you're planted. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. God bless.